1882, West Texas. The nearest courthouse is 200 miles away. A tent city full of 8,000 railroad workers, gamblers, and outlaws has sprung up in the middle of nowhere. And the man appointed to bring law and order to this chaos has exactly one law book, which, he eventually uses as kindling. His name was Judge Roy Bean, and he called himself the only law west of the Pecos. His courtroom was a saloon, his jury, his best drinking customers, his gavel, it was a confiscated pistol. Here are some actual verdicts from Judge Roy Bean. He fined a dead man $40 for carrying a concealed weapon. He freed a murderer because he couldn't find any law against killing a Chinaman. He hosted an illegal world championship boxing match on a sandbar in the Rio Grande while Texas Rangers watched hopelessly from the cliffs. Today we're diving into the wild and questionable and absolutely bizarre frontier justice of Judge Roy Bean. Real cases, actual verdicts, the man who made and broke the law, however he damn well pleased. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Texas History Mysteries, and today we're talking about one of the most outrageous figures in Texas frontier history. But before we dive in, can you like and subscribe the video? It really does help other people find this. Alright, so who was Roy Bean before he became a legend? Fantley Roy Bean Jr. was born around 1825 in Mason County, Kentucky, although even his birth year is disputed. Some sources say 1825, others say he was born as late as 1836. According to Jack Skiles, who researched census records for his 1996 book, Judge Roy Bean Country, Bean was probably about 10 years younger than historians traditionally thought. What we know for sure is that he came from an impoverished family and left home at the age of 15 or 16. And from that point on, Roy Bean lived the life of a frontier adventurer and, frankly, a troublemaker. According to the legend and various historical accounts, Bean's early adventures included working on a flat boat to New Orleans, joining his brother Sam in trading posts in Chihuahua, Mexico, killing a man in Mexico and fleeing to California, getting into a duel on horseback in San Diego in 1852 over a woman, allegedly being hanged by an angry mob after killing a Mexican officer in a duel over a different woman, but surviving because the rope stretched and sympathetic women cut him down. Now, some of these stories are probably embellished or not true at all, but multiple sources confirm that Bean did at least kill 2 men in duels. He was arrested multiple times and spent his early life one step ahead of the law. By the 1850s, Bean and his brother Joshua were running the headquarters saloon in San Gabriel, California, until Joshua was murdered, allegedly, by members of the Joaquin Marietta gang. Bean eventually made his way to Texas, got married, had children, and spent about 16 years living in San Antonio, where he ran a saloon in an area that became known as Beanville. But by 1882, at around age 57, Bean was broke, his marriage had fallen apart, and he was ready for a fresh start. So when the Southern Pacific Railroad started laying track through West Texas, Roy Bean followed the construction crews west with a tent, supplies, and 10 55-gallon barrels of whiskey. By July 1882, Bean had set up a tent saloon at a construction site called Vinegaroon, just west of the Pecos River. According to a Texas Ranger captain who visited the area, it was, I quote, the worst lot of roughs, gamblers, robbers, and pickpockets I've ever saw, end quote. Within 20 miles, there were 8,000 railroad workers. The nearest courthouse is 120 miles away at Fort Stockton. There was essentially no law enforcement. People at the time had a saying, I quote, west of the Pecos, there is no law. West of El Paso, there is no God, end quote. The Texas Rangers needed someone to serve as a local justice of the peace, so they wouldn't have to make up a 400-mile round trip to deliver prisoners to Fort Stockton. On August 2nd, 1882, the Pecos County Commissioner Court officially appointed Roy Bean as Justice of the Peace for Precinct Number 6. Bean was technically a legal authority. He had the full power of the law, but he had absolutely no legal training whatsoever. So his entire legal library consisted of one book, the 1879 edition of the Revised Statutes of Texas. According to the historical accounts, when the state sent him updated law books every 2 years, Bean just threw him in the fire. I mean, there's multiple sources that say that. Bean set up his courtroom in his tent saloon, which he soon rebuilt as a wooden structure he called the Jersey Lily, after a British actress named Lily Langtry, whom he adored from, afar. Above the door, his sign promised ice cold beer and law west of the Pecos. And that's how it worked. Bean would hold court in his saloon. Jurors were selected from his best bar customers, and during every court recess, jurors were expected to buy a drink. Expected to buy a drink. Being allowed no hung juries, no appeals. His verdicts were always final. And, because where they were had no jails, all sentences were settled by fines, which Bean conveniently pocketed instead of sending to the state. So let me tell you about some of the Judge Roy Bean's actual cases. And I want to be clear, these are documented historical accounts, not tall tales. The dead man case. Okay, so one of Bean's most famous rulings involved the corpse of a railroad worker who fell from the Pecos River bridge and died. When Bean performed the coroner's inquest, he found $40 and a pistol in the body. According to multiple historical sources that I've found, Bean declared, I quote, "I find this corpse guilty of carrying a concealed weapon and I fine it $40. He pocketed the money. Now here's what often gets left out of this story. According to some accounts, Bean actually used the $40 to pay for the man's coffin and headstone and burial, but that was on it can't be proven. So was it corruption or practical frontier justice? Depends on who you ask. The Chinese laborer case. This one is much darker and reveals the ugly, this is racism of the area. An Irishman named Paddy O'Rourke was accused of shooting a Chinese railroad laborer. During the trial, a mob of 200 angry Irishmen surrounded Bean's saloon, threatening to lynch the judge if O'Rourke wasn't freed. Bean looked through his law book and ruled homicide was the killing of a human being. However, he can find no law against killing a Chinaman. Case was dismissed. So this wasn't justice. This was Bean saving his own skin while perpetrating the violent racism against Chinese workers who built the railroad. The concealed weapon logic. Bean didn't think much of gun control laws. According to one account, when a man was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon, Bean ruled, quote, "That charge won't stick. If he was standing still when he was arrested, he wasn't carrying weapons because he wasn't going anywhere. And if he was not standing still, he was traveling. And it's illegal for travelers to carry weapons." Case dismissed. Pretty good logic. The habeas corpus incident. Bean once threatened to hang a lawyer for using profane language. When the lawyer referred to the habeas corpus of his client, Bean apparently thought habeas corpus was a curse word. The bridge collapse. During construction of a bridge at Vinegaroon, a structure collapsed and 10 workers fell. Bean was called to hold an inquest. He rode his mule to the accident site and pronounced all 10 men dead, even though only 7 had actually died and 3 were still alive. When questioned, Bean reasoned that the others would soon die anyway, and he didn't want to make the trip twice. Fortunately, he was wrong. The 3 men actually did survive, according to the sources that I found. The Lily Langtry obsession. Now, we need to talk about Bean's bizarre lifelong obsession with actress Lily Langtry. Lily Langtry was a famous British actress known as the Jersey Lily, spelled differently than Bean's saloon, but nevertheless. She was beautiful, famous, and completely unaware of Roy Bean's existence for most of his life. Bean named his saloon the Jersey Lily after her. He hung a tattered picture of her behind the bar. He wrote her letters and claimed she wrote him back. He even falsely claimed that the town of Langtry was named after her, when it was actually named after a railroad official named George Langtry, but, who knows. Bean promised locals that Miss Langtry would one day come to Langtry and perform, and in 1896, after his first saloon burned down, he rebuilt it and constructed a building across the street he called the Opera House, in anticipation of Lily's imagined visit. Roy Bean died in March 1903 without ever meeting Lily Langtry, but The crazy thing is 10 months after Bean died, Lily Langtry actually did visit Langtry, Texas, while traveling from New Orleans to San Francisco on the Southern Pacific Railroad. She stopped at the Jersey Lily Saloon, toured the town, and listened as locals told her stories about Judge Roy Bean, how he fined corpses, freed murderers, and shortchanged train passengers. According to Lily's biography, I quote, "It was a short visit, but definitely an unforgettable one," end quote. She missed him by less than a year. In 1896, Judge Roy Bean staged the event that made him nationally famous, an illegal world heavyweight boxing championship. Bob Fitzsimmons was scheduled to fight heavyweight champion James J. Corbett, but the Texas legislature had just outlawed prize fighting statewide. Governor Charles Culberson dispatched Texas Rangers to make sure no fight happened in Texas. Arizona, Arkansas, and New Mexico all passed laws blocking it. Mexico's President Diaz issued an official ban on all prize fighting. Meanwhile, Corbett retired and handed his title to Irishman Peter Mayhew. Fitzsimmons still wanted to fight for the championship, but had nowhere to hold the bout. Promoter Dan Stewart was desperate. People suggested absurd venues, including fighting in a hot air balloon basket, a bunch of other things. And that's when Judge Roy Bean saw an opportunity. On February 21st, 1896, Bean sent a telegram to Stewart that they could hold the fight in Langtry. Stewart arranged for spectators, press, and gambling fans to board a special train in El Paso. They traveled 400 miles to Langtry, but nobody knew where the actual fight would be held until they arrived. When the train pulled into Langtry, Bean was waiting on the porch of the Jersey Lily. He welcomed them. "This way to the fight of the century, gents, and there's cold beer at ringside." Bean had constructed a boxing ring on a sandbar at the bottom of the Rio Grande Canyon. On the Mexican side of the river, Texas Rangers had no jurisdiction there, and Mexico had no law enforcement within hundreds of miles. Legendary lawman Bat Masterson served as the master of ceremonies. The fight itself lasted exactly 95 seconds. Fitzsimmons knocked out Mayhew unconscious within a single punch, apparently. Texas Rangers watched helplessly from the bluffs on the U.S. side, and after the fight, everyone returned to the Jersey Lily for drinks before heading back to El Paso. This event alone made Judge Roy Bean completely nationally famous. Nationally famous. Now, it's easy to paint Roy Bean as just a corrupt, racist con man, and there's some truth to that, but according to several sources, Bean also had a surprising streak of generosity towards the poor. He reportedly used some of the fines he collected to buy medicine for sick residents of Langtry and food for the destitute instead of sending it to the government. He also distributed confiscated contraband amongst the poor. When a dead man was fined $40, yes, that the case we already talked about, it's well documented that he used the money to buy a coffin and paid the undertaker, though he did keep the pistol reportedly. In 1902, Bean voluntarily retired as Justice of the Peace after 20 years. He had been voted out twice, in 1886 and 1896, but kept getting reappointed. On March 16, 1903, Roy Bean died in his saloon at age 77 or 68, depending on which year of birth you believe. According to the Texas State Historical Association, he died from lung and heart ailments. History.com reported he died after a drinking binge. The Encyclopedia of the Great Plains says he died from excess of liquor. Now, the thing that we do know is he was buried in Del Rio. So what do we make of Judge Roy Bean? Someone who took care of his community. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Was he a folk hero who brought order to a lawless frontier, or a corrupt charlatan who made up the laws as he went along? Honestly, in my opinion, he was a little bit of both, and that's what makes him so cool. And he was officially appointed. He was a legal authority. It was his own brand of rough justice, however questionable, but it was arguably better than complete chaos. But he also pickpocketed fines, twisted the law, violence, all this kind of stuff. The Texas State Historical Association sums it up pretty well, in my opinion. I quote, "His shrewdness, audacity, and humor, aided by his knack for self-dramatization, made him an enduring part of American folklore," end quote. Today, about 40,000 people visit the Judge Roy Bean Visitor Center in Langtry every year. The Jersey Lily still stands. About 60% of the wood is believed to be original. Six Flags Over Texas even has a roller coaster that tips its hat towards him. For any of you from DFW, did you ever ride Judge Roy Scream? Because that's where that comes from. The law west of the Pecos, a legend built on whiskey, questionable verdicts, and one man's ability to turn frontier chaos into personal profit. Sometimes actual justice. If you like that, this video, give us a like and subscribe so people can find this video easier. And let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you think, do you have a historical story I should check out? I would love to know. Have you ridden the Judge Roy Scream? Yeah, I don't know. Let me know. Thanks for spending your time with me. See you on the next one.